to the Live Out Loud podcast with River Wynn and Michele Flamer.
Hi, River.
Good morning, Michele.
How are you?
I am good. I've got my coffee and I'm
Yay.
ready for the day.
You have a good smile on your face. Are you excited about today's conversation?
I am. I think it's going to be a really, really fun conversation. What
Or
about
as you say, we might get juicy.
It might get juicy. Yes.
So we're super psyched. We have Samantha here, the Lesbian Curiosity Coach. And don't be jealous of our gray hair, River, because yours is so like amazing and red. But we are rocking our grays.
Oh, there's gray underneath this red hair dye.
There is. Okay. Well,
There
that's
is.
good to know. Samantha, welcome to Live Out Loud. How are you?
I'm good. Hi. I'm so happy to be here.
Thanks for being here.
I know it's awesome that you're here. So I would love for you to tell with your own words, because I think you'll say it way better than I will. Like where you came from, like how you started in this industry and as a practicing therapist. What I just would love to hear your journey a little bit, and so that everybody who's never met you before or seen you on the TikTok, the Instagram, wherever people may find you. And so, yeah, I just want to introduce you to everybody. So go for it.
Yeah, sure. So let's see. Well, I would say I've always been a very curious human. And that started very early, with growing up in a family where I was kind of like, what is happening around here? Why are these people married to each other? And, why is there so much fighting? And, and I'm supposed to do this thing too, but why? And so, but like really, really curious in a quiet way and just kind of watching dynamics and being very confused. Even by like what I like to call the conveyor belt life, which is just like what you're supposed to do and all of that. So I would say that led me to I was like a very free-spirited young person until I realized I hit around 24 and I was like, okay, I went to college. I was a psych major. I graduated. I lived in Europe for a few years when all my friends were going to grad school and starting jobs. I was like, no, I'm not going to do any of that. I'm out of the box. I'm out of the box. I'm out of the box. Not sexuality wise, but just, living wise, not doing what's expected of me. Mm-hmm. And then I came back and I kind of landed in like, okay, well, I guess it's time to get on the conveyor belt now because I'm 24 and I'm getting a job and like, I don't really know what else to do.
Oh, you're such an old maid at that age, right? No, just kidding.
Right. I mean, exactly. So anyway, I did end up getting married at 27 to a man and had started going back to school to become a social worker at that time, got pregnant with twins, stopped school, became a mom. I have 3 kids that now I have twin boys that are 26 and a 23-year-old daughter. And basically, just sort of did what was expected of me until 9/11 happened. And that living in New York City, I live in New York City, that really shook up everything for me. So, I was doing what I was supposed to do, what I thought I was supposed to do, and I just couldn't anymore. It just shook me up and I was like, I need to live my truth. And even though it wasn't like something I said really out loud, I just started to realize that I was attracted to women and I was going to need to do something about this. So my coming out and kind of coming into my career all kind of came at the same time, I would say. So I ended up at 32 coming out, leaving my marriage and going back to school to become a therapist. I ended up becoming a marriage and family therapist because that seemed more interesting to me with the relational dynamics. And I've been in private practice for about 14 years. Awesome. And really wanted to focus on helping women coming out later just because I had gone through that. And so I was doing that for that time. I did have many clients in New York that were coming out later and helping them through that. But I always really wanted to do groups. And it was hard. It was hard to figure out. And how do I get enough people just in New York City that are going to come, and what nights it going to be? And then COVID happened. And so COVID was this time where there was a tsunami of women coming out later in life. And
interesting.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. It really, I mean, it was like in droves. I'd never seen anything like it on Instagram. It was like very noticeable. And I realized, oh my God, this is the time. I can work with people virtually. I don't need a space. I can do it all online. I was doing all my sessions online as a therapist. And so from there, I started to develop a program to take women through really like unpacking all of the conditioning that we are packed with as, you know, females in the world, and just really coming into their authentic selves around their sexuality and whatnot. So I'm still a therapist. I still have a private practice. And I also have this amazingly fun and energizing coaching business, working with amazing, brave women that are on this journey to even just be curious about themselves, you know, and get off of the conveyor belt life of like, I know what happens next. Now I know what happens next. Like, this way of living, which is just so deadening, and instead be curious and lean into, you know, really all aspects of themselves and being authentically alive. So that is, you know, that is where I am now.
I love that.
I know, I love it too. I'm so curious about the whole catalyst thing, because it sounds like you didn't even have a catalyst. You kind of came to this whole thing on your own. Oh, okay. Yeah. Oh, yeah. Okay.
I would say 9/11, not true. 9/11 was my catalyst in a way. It kind of, it shook me up enough to say, you just can't do this anymore. So it was one kind of catalyst. And then the next was, I actually became obsessed with my then yoga teacher, who was 5 years younger than me, had also never been with women. I was obsessed with her for about 5 weeks, where I didn't even understand what was happening. So I would come home and I would tell my husband about it. I'm so obsessed with her. She's so amazing. Like, I don't know what it is about her. It's her voice. It's her music. I was following her from town to town, taking every class I could. This was out in the Hamptons. And, you know, and until it hit me that like, oh, actually, I kind of want to like touch her. I was like, oh, well, actually, I really kind of want to like kiss her. And then I was like, oh, so she was my first relationship. I was in a relationship with her. I started a relationship with her, told him that I couldn't stay married after about maybe 8 weeks of knowing her, and went through a very litigious 3-year divorce. That was one of the worst divorces I've heard about anyway. We lived under the same roof for 3 years.
Wow. That's a whole other podcast.
Yeah. So
or it's just literally cocktail somewhere, you know, it's like,
yeah. It's a dark period. But she stayed with me. We lived together for a few years afterwards. I moved out. We lived together with my kids going back and forth. And then we came to a close at about 5.5 years. The relationship lasted. Oh,
that just avalanched like 10 questions. But River, do you have anything going on?
Go for it. You got pressing questions there.
Well, no, I mean, it's just like, okay, so I'm curious as well, right? Like, I love being curious, and it's fascinating to me. First of all, I love your voice for these later in life lesbians. Like, I think you are just such a soft landing for all of them. And when they get to that point of like wanting to pivot and really dig in for themselves, I love that there's a you in the world for that, right? And I wish there was a lot more, because I feel like it's still very lonely for so many people. So how did you manage? I mean, God, it must have been a lot of conversations, I'm guessing, but how did you manage that moment where everything sort of overlapped? Like, you had your conversations, you were in this horrible like divorce, you were still like falling in love and figuring out love for yourself. Like, what is this new? And then you also like connected and talked with your kids. Like, what was that? If I may ask, like, what was that conversation like?
Yeah. So, I mean, we're going back now. So this happened in 2002.
Yeah.
So my kids were very little. my daughter was 2 and my twins were 5 when I met my first partner. So there was a very organic way that she kind of just started to hang around more. And the conversation with them was really about my husband and I at that time separating. So we sat them down to tell them that we were separating, did not mention anything about my sexuality because they were just too young. And she started to, she just started to be around more and more. And, they just got used to her. And then, they just would call her, she was my partner. So they'd be like my mom and her partner, and it was just very organic. Yeah.
And then co-parenting, was that a positive?
I mean,
because of what you went through, it must have been challenging.
It was challenging. I mean, it's, it's been a challenging, I'm going to say it's been a challenging life in a lot of ways. I mean, my kids are amazing. And one of my kids is gay, which makes me so happy. But it's been very challenging, and co-parenting with him and his wife has,
Oh, he's remarried now.
Oh, he's been remarried for a long, long time.
Wow. Okay.
Yeah. He got remarried pretty quickly. Yeah. And they're a great match, which is so fantastic. I really like, in my yoga practice, I would put out this intention every time I'd start my practice that he would find happiness and goodness. And he did. I mean, they are a perfect pair. That said, it has still been extremely difficult to co-parent with them. And then also having this partner, it was all challenging, and I wish I had like a general, like, this is how you do it. But I think it's just for every couple, it's different. And after she and I broke up, I went through this period of kind of like, she didn't have any kids. So it was like, do I date people with kids? Do I date people without kids? Like, what's the right match? And I still don't really have the answer to that, but it was a lot of trying to figure that out. Yeah, because kids take a lot of energy,
Did you go on the dating apps and stuff like that? Everyone's so curious.
The dating apps. Yeah. I mean, I was essentially, I think I was like maybe we met when I was 33. So I was like 38 and a half, I would say, by the time we broke up. And that was my first time being like a single lesbian in the world. And I was just like, oh my gosh, I don't even know, because I didn't know I was attracted to her when I met her. Like I was just obsessed with her. And it was never like, oh my God, she's so beautiful or so my type. It was just like, she was a human that for some reason I felt pulled toward. So when I was then single, I was like, I have no idea where to find a person, like what, like on the apps, I'm looking at these women. I don't even know what I'm looking for, I mean, how am I supposed to tell by a picture? So I went through this whole period and I created this whole scale about attraction, and I had all these theories. I mean, it was actually
you love data, don't you?
I do. I love collecting data. I'm just like so into that. So, I mean, I ended up kind of figuring, I've basically always been with more or less the same type of person, but I just didn't know that initially. So yeah, I mean, dating apps has been how I've met basically every partner except for my current partner.
Yeah. So, and she's adorable.
Yeah, she's awesome.
Yeah, she's really cool. I'm enjoying just getting to know her through her videos and stuff like that. So
prior to that first partner that you had, was that like really just like your first introduction, like you to yourself? Like you didn't know prior to that you were attracted to women, or was that just kind of like that was the catalyst and you didn't know before that?
Oh no, I knew. I mean, I knew, but in a very subconscious way. So like while my husband would travel about 4 months out of the year for his business, and when he was gone, I would be reading lesbian novels and I'd be renting all the lesbian dramas. And I definitely had some attractions when I was younger, and looking back now, I can call them out, even going back to like when I was 10, 11, 12, but I didn't know that what I was feeling was attraction. And I think a lot of that is because of also how we're socialized and conditioned, which is, about the male gaze, which is like, that's what's supposed to give you, like, if you can attract the male gaze, then that gives you those feelings, and those are the feelings you're supposed to have. Like, it was just so confusing. So I had all the feelings around certain girls, but I didn't know what those feelings meant. And instead I was conditioned to attract the male gaze. And that gave me a feeling of value and worthiness and power. And so, no, I mean, it's very, very clear. I had friends also ask me if I wanted to like pull around and try it out. And I was always like, oh, no, no, no. You know, I literally turned them down until this sort of like, I'd say September 11th. It was just, I'd been watching the videos and reading the novels and all of that prior to September 11th. So that was the moment where I was just like, okay, I'm unhappy and I need to like live my truth. And then I opened up and then I started looking around, and that was September of 2001. And it was it was July of 2002 when I met her. So it was a very short, not even a year until I met her.
It's interesting that 9/11 ended up being your catalyst for that change, because I was trying to think of myself during that time, living in LA. My partner and I at the time were remodeling our home off of Melrose, and our bed had been moved into our newly renovated kitchen. It was that big that we could like, where before the dining table got, or what shit. And then there was the TV up on up on part of the island, where I could watch TV. And I was literally supposed to fly out that morning to Logan I was working for Rockport Shoes. And so we were going to have our sales meeting. And all of a sudden it was like, I was getting texts from the East Coast, my East Coast partner friends and stuff, saying, hey, turn on the news. And then I just sat there for 17 hours. And for me, that was, 9/11 for me was more about, I think with probably a lot of other people, it was just more feeling like, wow, we're not safe any longer in our country. But it didn't make me like want to change a bunch of stuff, because I was pretty content at that moment. It was COVID that for me really propelled the divorce in my mind, that had kind of cemented like, wow, I love our unit, but we've grown apart. And it's just time to make changes for our own benefit. So it's fascinating, because you're literally the first person I heard that really wanted to change their life after 9/11. But then again, I haven't asked that question a lot. So now I'm like super curious to like, I'm going to go around the room and my friends and just say like, did 9/11 spur any changes for you? Because I think that's kind of fascinating. River, where were you during 9/11?
I'm giggling because as you're talking about this, so I was 12.
Okay, that's true.
But as I was thinking about this, so I was 12 and I was in a period of my life where that year, my mom and I had a conversation where and I was just a little bit of context. I grew up in a religious cult. And so my family was very conservative Christian, very religious. And that year, my mom pulled me aside for a conversation and she said, I think it's time that you know that women love other women and that's a sin, and had a whole conversation around that. So right around that time, I was being introduced to this concept that women love other women, but it was a very shameful, sinful thing. And had some family members confess at that same time that they had thoughts about women and they felt so sinful. So my introduction to some of the thoughts I was already having and kind of knowing that I was attracted to other girls was very quickly met with, it's a sin, it's shameful. So it's interesting to hear like the comparison between different stages we were at that point in time.
It's like, I know, that's what I was just thinking. Like, it's really fascinating that three of us, in very different stages of our life had these unique thoughts, obviously. But that's interesting around shame, because like Samantha, there must be a lot of shame that comes with some of your most favorite clients, and things like that when they're going through this.
Yes. And that is certainly from like what you said, River, religion, and really just the conditioning, the patriarchy, and the things that we learn. Yeah, there's tons of shame, guilt, and anxiety. I do a lot of teaching about that in my bootcamp program, just so that folks understand what is actually happening to them when they're feeling those things. And because they're emotions that really get you stuck.
Yeah.
There's like not a lot of movement in shame or in guilt, and so
and
yeah.
is that coming from childhood trauma? Like, where does all of that reside? Where does it come from?
I mean, the way I look at it is that shame, guilt, and anxiety are inhibitory emotions. And what they do is they keep you away from your core emotions. And the reason that they do that is because so we're born with core emotions. Every single human is born with the same core emotions. But then when you're growing up and you're in a family or in a community where certain emotions are not allowed, and actually like you're shamed for having them, or you're sent to your room for having them, so now you're alone, you don't even know how to handle these emotions, but you're now alone with them, or they're just not acceptable, like you're a girl, you're not allowed to be angry or something like that. What happens is, like with that one, would be you get filled with shame. So instead of feeling the anger, which is not allowed, our systems use these other things, shame, guilt, and anxiety, to inhibit you from feeling the core emotion. And they keep you in these other sort of higher level emotions. Well, the shame, guilt, and anxiety, inhibitory emotions that just, they're protective. It's trying to protect you from feeling what you're actually feeling, because that is not accepted or allowed.
How did the breakthroughs happen with some of these women?
Yeah, it's really, really the unpacking. It's, starting from the beginning. I start from the very beginning with folks. We start with sexual narratives. How did you become a sexual human in the world? What did you learn about yourself as a sexual human in the world? Based on your earliest memories, earliest of time, family of origin, what you saw, what you were told, what you experienced, around affection, around puberty, around anything sexual. Like, what were the narratives that you carried from that time and the beliefs that were instilled in you from that time? And then starting to unpack those by becoming aware of what they are, and then being like, do those actually align with where you are today?
Yeah.
Yeah.
River and I both have young daughters, right? And I'm working on being a very intentional parent, and coming from it as a very conscious parenting. When she says she loves her body, I say, good. You should love your body. It's absolutely beautiful for being a beautiful 11-year-old, girl. And I've asked her since she was 5 also. And it was interesting because I was talking about this with some people last night, about how I've normalized asking her if she feels like herself in her body. And I've asked this about her since she was 5. So I literally say, I'll like say, baby, do you feel like a girl? Like, do you match your parts? Like, do you like your boobies? Do you like your, your bits? And now that she's 11, she'll be like, oh yeah, look at this. Look at mom. She's like coming out of a shower and she's like, look at me, and I just marvel, and I'm just like, yes, I broke a generational ancestral curse, female. And the other thing that I'm really trying to teach her now is to not say sorry for nothing. I'm like, if you hurt someone's feeling, absolutely, that warrants it. But I'm like, even my friends, they're catching themselves on text now, because I'm like, stop saying sorry. Like, we have to help each other as women, as a collective, of saying, and my friends will be like, hey, sorry I didn't get back to you, like blah blah blah. I'm like, oh my God, you had a life, it's okay. It's like, it's cool. Like, texting is like, come back to me in 2 days, 3 days. I mean, I may worry about you because it's not the typical cadence, but you don't have to apologize for not like responding fast. It's not like it's a work thing or whatever, and you have to like get back to. So it's really fascinating. So with these little girls, like, you raise these beautiful 3 humans, like, what are a couple of other maybe tips that would be great for us to start those conversations with our daughters, especially, to allow them to not have like to feel that shame. Like, I mean, she's going to be in therapy at some point in her life. Like we all have to do it at some point. And I'm okay with that. I just don't want to add to that.
Yeah. Yeah. And I understand that. And it sounds like you're doing a beautiful job of really, almost like really teaching her to be embodied, which is something that is so hard. I think for humans, not just for women, really. I think for everybody, it's very hard to know what it feels like in your body. So yeah, I mean, you're already doing a lot of it. I think, focusing on like what feels good, like what feels like, does that feel good? Does that feel like encouraging pleasure kind of feelings? Because I think women have such a hard time around receiving pleasure, whether that is even receiving a compliment, or just something that like feels good, to them. It's like really encouraging pleasure, and that's okay, and it's more than okay. It's like, could be daily pleasure in whatever way that looks. And then I also think just being very open and sort of like helping them to give words to what they're feeling. I mean, she's 11. It sounds like she already has a lot of words, but for younger kids, just to narrate for them like what you're seeing. If they don't have the words for it, you can also just speak to what you're seeing them show in their behaviors and kind of create a narration around it, so that you're teaching them how to have language around what they're feeling. Because without that, you become an adult that has no language around what you're feeling. And that is a difficult place to navigate life from. And maybe you can do it in a work setting, but in a relational setting, it's going to be very challenging.
Did the majority of your later in lifers have children of their own? Or, I mean, is that a common theme?
I would, I have women that I've worked with that are in their 20s that have been with a boyfriend for 8 years and no children, not married. I have women who have never really had relationships with either men or women, and that really thought they were asexual, actually, and that are just starting to like accept and allow themselves to be attracted to women and start dating and have sexual experiences for the first time. Then I have women that have been married for 25 years and have 2 kids that are teenagers. And so it's like, I mean, I have somebody who just joined this recent boot camp that's starting in September who called me this weekend, and she's 67, was married for 40 years, and just got divorced 4 years ago, and had relationships with women before she got married, but then was with a man for 40 years. And I mean, like in tears about like having spent 40 years with someone who had no emotional intelligence or space for anything. And just, so it's like just as unique as every human is. It's like each experience and it's wild how the community comes together, because everybody is really someplace else, but nobody's alone because we're all in it together. And so it just creates this like, I mean, the container is like such good feels. And especially for me, because it's so full circle, it's like this energy flow of like, I really lived through a lot of difficulty, and now I'm like helping people.
You're giving back.
I'm giving back, but it's just, I get such pride in watching these women be like courageous, and just watching them come into themselves, and the changes, like the physical changes, and you can just see happening in them. It's just amazing. It's so amazing.
I love that. It's interesting because when I talk to some of my friends who are in the Club Lilies group, and the Arizona group is very connected, very tight knit group. And I've really enjoyed getting to know all of them and hold space for them, and, just be an ear when I need to. But the one thing that always really tugs at my heartstrings is when they're mourning what they've lost out on, or what they think they've just missed out on. And River, it's like, oh, I just want to hold them in that moment and tell them that the fact is that they push through it. They're here now and they're living their life, and to sort of give themselves grace over that. But it's a real thing.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. I think the grieving, you know,
That's it. The grieving.
the grieving. I think it's, and the grieving and the guilt, right? Those are the two things that come up for me. So there's the women that I work with, it's that they feel so guilty. And I think a lot of the guilt and maybe the anxiety is covering up some of the sadness and the loss, which is like twofold, right? It's like, oh, I spent 30 years not really being authentically who I am, not really being able to connect to myself. So it's like I lost 30 years of my life in a way. And then also grieving what you thought you wanted and then don't want that and realize you don't want that. But like, it was this thing that you thought was going to make you happy. And now you're letting that go. So it's like the grieving and the loss is huge. And I encourage everybody to just sit in that, like to literally just allow it, like however it shows up, whether you write it out or you just need to cry for days or months, whatever it is. But like, it's going to show up somewhere if you don't allow yourself to feel it when it's there. It's going to show up somewhere down the road, or it's going to show up as guilt and anxiety. So just feel your feelings all the way through. It's something I always say.
So we've talked about like shame and guilt and anxiety. Where does fear come into play with that? Like, do you see that a lot of fear, and kind of how do you address that with people, like the fears they have around what they're exploring and being curious?
Yeah. I mean, that's, again, it's like some of that is part of the unpacking that I do with people. So fear is a core emotion. So it's valid. So the first thing I do is validate them. Like, that's really valid that you're feeling fear. This is friggin' scary, like really scary. You're going from what you knew you were not only like supposed to do, but there was this whole plan for you, and you know exactly how to fit in and what role to play and how to show up. Like, there's a script and you just have to play that role. And that's for a lot of people, they think that is very relieving, because if they didn't have that, they don't know what they would do. So going into being a queer human is like, you lose the script, there is no, like, you're supposed to do anything. And so I validate that is really scary. And then it's starting to unpack. Let's talk about the fear. Let's roll the tape out to the end. Tell me the things that you're scared about. Like, okay. And then what's going to happen? And then what's going to happen? And then what's going to happen? And typically at the end of things people have fear of, at the end of it, it's a fear of being alone. I mean, that is just what comes up for most people.
Wow. So out of the full circle moment is, I have this family. It's it's just okay. I'm not super happy, but I have these beautiful little kids, whatever. And, everyone's accepting my in-laws, my parents, we all come together for holidays. So all of a sudden that fear in the face and feeling like at the end of the day, it's just feeling alone. So how do you combat that, or what suggestions do you tell? Because there is Club Lilies out there, and there are ways to make and build community. Is that sort of the stepping stones for you? Is like, find friends? Like,
yeah, I mean, honestly, like at this point, most of the people that I work with do the community piece that I offer. So they're in my community program, which is the boot camp. So there is community, and they are supporting each other at the same time that they're working with me. And, really at the end of the day, it's like, it's coaching. I mean, it's coaching because it's like, I have therapy clients that I've been seeing for 14 years, right? But with the coaching clients, what they get out of a boot camp transformation wise is huge. And then they continue on and continue to have community. And you see people make changes in a very short time, like in a year. I've seen people who have been married for 33 years, just completely, now they have a girlfriend and they're separated from their spouse, and they came out to their adult children, and they're living much more authentically. And the fear of being alone is, I think, so there's this thing called traumatic aloneness, which is what you experience as a child when you are left alone with your emotions, when you are too young to know what to do with them. And it's like trauma inducing because you are sent away and you have no way to handle what's happening for you. So there is like a traumatic aloneness, or even like if you're bullied as a little kid and you can't fit into the group, like you are traumatically alone. So I try to help people untangle those wires of a childhood traumatic aloneness and being alone as an adult. Because as adults, we actually have the tools to be alone. And, you know, and we have the tools to work on not being alone and finding community. Whereas when you're a kid, you can't do that. Like you're in your parents' house. If you're sent to your room or you're locked at home alone and your family leaves you for the day or whatever it is, you have no tools. Like you are stuck. As an adult, we have agency. Like we can make choices, right? We can change and affect change in our own lives that we can't do as children. So I try to help people understand the difference between traumatic aloneness and help them heal some of that, as well as see that, you know, as an adult, like you can show up for yourself. You can have your own back. You can take care of yourself, so that they're not going through the world just like scanning for somebody to take care of them, because that's also not going to really work if you can't take care of yourself. So it's like a lot of like, it's coaching and therapy and community, like all happening in the same space. But yes, people need to go out and find community. I mean, that's just important.
But day 1 to the 12th week must be a really amazing place to sit. And I love the fact that, well, as we were talking about just building community, like just joining your boot camp gives them 10 to 12 new friends, possibly, depending upon how big that particular group is.
Yes.
And then, I mean, that's really cool. So they're digging out of a lot of information and a lot of sadness and processing, but they're hearing other people so they don't feel alone immediately, day 1, basically. And then that process, oh man, I can't even imagine how rewarding that must be.
Yeah. So rewarding. I mean, it's like, it like brings me to tears. I mean, at the end of a boot camp, it's like, I mean, honestly, like people are in tears at the end of a boot camp. And I just started creating an alumni support circle. So now
that's what I was going to ask you, if they have like access to other folks that went through your program.
Yes. I have a private network where all of the women are, so they can access each other through there. But I just started running a twice a month support circle coaching call. So, which has just been fantastic. And I think we'll keep growing, but really every cohort, every boot camp, they have all stayed in touch, even without me doing that. Cause I was like busy trying to just create things and also have a full-time practice. So, you know, they were doing their own Zoom calls, and visiting each other and traveling together. And yeah, so that's
beautiful.
Amazing. Yeah.
So what's next for you? What's like, you know, where do you want to see your practice and this beautiful, you know, community that you're starting to create? Where do you see this going? And like, what's your dream with all of that?
Yeah. I mean, it's been about 2.5 years since I started it. So it's not very long. And my dream is really at this point, and I'm also working with a coach, so she's helping me with that. But my dream is to really cut back my private practice, maybe to like 12 people a week. That's it for therapy clients, and to run, let's say, 3 boot camps a year. They're 12 weeks each. Really keep building this sort of community on the back end of like the support, and you know, create different programs. You know, I love communication, teaching people how to communicate directly, teaching people about just relationships and just, I mean, there's so many things I want to teach, but I don't have enough time. So I'm hoping to scale back on my private practice, and I'm getting set up to actually let my clients know, which is not going to be an easy thing to do, for people who have been seeing me for a long time, that they're going to have to probably find somebody new, and start to just really throw myself more into the coaching and really teaching. And, really at the end of the day, it's like, I've said this, that I feel a little bit like I have this key to like unlock the prison cells that women find themselves in because of the conditioning. Like I can help you get out of that. It doesn't even, you can be married to a man. Like it's not even just about that. I mean, this is just my niche area, but like, this is just about how you're living by, living by shoulds. I should this and I should that. And like, no, and so it can get very big, but I'm trying to keep it very small and focused, because that's how it's happening. That's how it really works, I think. But yeah, I mean, I'm not sure where it's all going to go, but it's very exciting.
Do you see yourself like doing a retreat in person and things like that?
Yeah, I mean, Heather, my partner Heather, she loves that idea, and she's really into retreats. I've said to her, because I'm highly introverted, which you probably would never get from my TikToks or Instagram. You'd be like, wait, what? But I'm very introverted, and also being in groups, I'm very sensitive to energy. So having to pick up on a lot of different people's energies and navigating that, it feels very hard for me. I mean, I honestly, if you told me 2.5 years ago that I'd be where I am now, or that I could be on a podcast, or that I could create TikToks or Instagram reels, or run, groups with 12 people in them, I'd tell you you're crazy and that you're thinking about a different person. So
I relate to that so much.
Yeah. I mean, it's possible. Maybe one day people have asked me repeatedly, like, when are you doing a retreat? Can you please do something in person? And I'm just like, oh my God, I need to hide in the corner,
It sounds like so much work.
Yeah.
Mental work.
Yes.
But Heather's a good balance for you in that sense, right?
She's a great balance. Yes, she's a great balance, and we'll see. I mean, I the retreat idea, every time I hear it, I'm just like, but how?
You need little extrovert people who are around you to facilitate, so that you literally can protect your energy and then walk in, do the thing, and then literally walk back out.
Yes.
And kind of like, from the back of the room, and sort of like, I think there's many ways you can do it, just by having the right people around you that supports that. And
totally.
And also, like, that can sort of say, okay, here's our quizzes. And then they're going to go to you, and you're going to be in your room, like going through it all, and then like coming out and, focused on, one-on-ones or whatever, kind of smaller, tinier groups throughout that day. But I think it's doable. And I think you have magic in you to have that happen. And I think the one thing that River and I are finding, that these guests that we're bringing on to the podcast, because this lights us up. I mean, we're so freaking excited to just we're so curious as people, that we're finding people that we're curious about, and then getting to have like in-person conversations. Like I said, it's kind of a pinch me moment to have like this conversation with you, because I've been following you for, a long enough time to sort of be like, yeah, she's cool. Like, I just want to be friends with her. And she just has so much lovely, so many amazing things to say. So I just really appreciate what you're doing for our community, and for giving anybody who's going through something challenging, a safe place to land, because you have to be so brave. Like, I take it so for granted. Like, River, I came out at 19. Like, I didn't even think, I was like, oh, Mom, Dad, I'm gay. And they were like having their own moment with it, but then everyone was fine. I've never had any lashback from work life to like, I've just been me. Like, I don't realize how lucky I have been for that purpose.
Yeah. And, I kind of, like came out as bisexual when I was married. And so, I received a lot of, as you can imagine, a lot of interesting conflict around that from the person I was married to and their family and some of my family members. And it's so interesting now, like being identified as bisexual, I even receive a lot of interesting narratives around that from people who message me and they're like, oh, you talk about how you date men, but we don't see you dating women. Like, what's the evidence that you are bisexual? And I'm like, I don't need to provide any evidence to you of my sexuality. But it's so interesting how people who you may not even know expect you to performatively show the evidence of who you are and challenge you around that. It's so fascinating.
Yeah, I think that I've heard that, and it can create insecurity. I get that a lot with women who are having these feelings and they've been with a man for a really long time and they're having these feelings of attraction, but they actually haven't had the experience with a woman. And so they actually are doing what these people are doing to you. They're doing it to themselves. Right? Is this really a lot of gaslighting, a lot of self-doubt? Like, how do I know this is real? How do I know what I'm feeling is really true? What if this isn't true? What if I end up leaving my marriage and then I find that it wasn't true? Or what if I end up alone? It's kind of like, oh my gosh, like now it's based on whether or not you're going to be alone. I mean, how did we get there? I mean, so anyway, I believe that, people want evidence. That's the thing. That's the opposite of curiosity. People want to know, or can you just live in a space of not knowing? And you can know yourself or not know with yourself, whatever's internal, but like, you don't have to show that to anybody else.
Yeah, no, you don't owe that to anyone.
I think the only thing we want to owe to ourselves or to anybody is to literally live the most authentic life that you can live, no matter who you find attractive behind closed doors or out in the world, right? It's neither here nor there. And that's kind of what this podcast is all about. Live out loud, live your truth, walk the walk. And regardless of what conversations are happening around you, but just trying to sit in that authentic space and to feel like we were talking about full circle, being embodied, feeling whole in your body.
Yeah.
It's a rare thing, I have to say, for most humans.
I mean, that's kind of why we wanted to create this, because I wanted to give people, especially women, some new voices to hear, and where we're not seeing the end result. Like I love Glennon and her process right now. Like if you listen to We Can Do Hard Things, which is such an amazing podcast in itself, but the fact that Glennon basically put a magnifying lens on her own, on her eating disorders and her process. And she just didn't want to show up one day all shiny and say, I'm here. And I think, hi, I'm here, I'm queer, and, get used to it type of thing. And I think it's a really important, whether you're queer or not, it's more about, it's okay to show people the ugly bits along the way, and the authentic friendships and the core people who are meant to be in your life are just going to be like, yeah, okay, let's do this thing. Like, it's all good.
Yeah, absolutely. I agree.
And you feel like you have a good core group of people, Samantha, around you. You have some amazing support and you feel, blessed in that sense, or you created that for yourself.
Yeah. I mean, I think I've had, I would say that I would say honestly that up until COVID, I feel like I was probably living mostly in survival mode most of the time. And surviving, but like it was a lot of survival mode. So I have late blooming friends. I have friends that I met back in 2003. I did a weekend workshop. I don't know if you ever heard of Joanne Fleischer. She wrote the book, Married to a Man in Love with a Woman. And she's probably in her 80s now, but back then she was the first. I mean, I was like, okay, I am the only woman in the world who is feeling these things. I don't know anybody who's gone through this. Like, I don't know how to go through this. And online, she had like a posting board, and it was called Ask Joanne. And it was all women writing in on this topic. And it turns out she was out of Philadelphia, that she had weekend workshops. So I went to one of her weekend workshops back in 2003. There were 20 women from all around the world who were married to men, and in love with a woman, or in love with women in general. And so I met friends there that I'm just celebrating my 20-year anniversary with one of my friends. We're going to Iceland in September to hike. But yeah, I have late blooming friends that are close friends. I have therapist friends, coach friends. But I am a pretty introverted, very happy spending time with myself or with my person or with my few people kind of person. Definitely not like I need to go out and do the latest anything person. So yeah.
That's
my
awesome.
dogs are my support system.
Oh my God. I'm obsessed with my dog.
Yeah.
Same.
I know, dogs are literally the best. And that's funny, because there's so many of my friends who have just feel lonely. I mean, they're just lonely after COVID, and there's just this deep lonely. And I'm like, get a dog, just get a dog. They get you out. People talk to you for even on the walks. Like, there's just this lovely commonality that everybody gravitates towards a friendly, sweet animal. And I'm like, I just never feel lonely the minute I leave my house with Cooper. It's just really nice. Well,
Yeah.
I think
We're in the house.
I think you're awesome, of course. And I'm so grateful that you spent time with us today and are giving of yourself every day in your movement. And River, we're so lucky.
Yeah, I know. Thank you so much for being here. This has been such a juicy conversation. I love it.
Yeah, it's been great. Thank you for having me on.
I very much appreciate you. And we're so excited to see where things go with you next.
Yeah.
And we'll be following. And
Yes.
I can't wait to introduce more people to you. So, I mean, that's my mission, is to just spread good people. And I'm super excited about it.
Yeah.
Thank you. Thank you.
you.